Hi guys, welcome to Compast, where we use history to reflect on the present day. Now today I'm going to be comparing this guy with these guys, and even this guy. Some of the things that were wrong with Mao's systems of decision making are also wrong with ours. Okay, so let's start with Mao. Mao's Great Leap Forward campaign between 1959 and 1961 caused the deaths of between 15 and 55 million people. It was one of the great catastrophes of human history, and it was not intentional mass murder. It was one enormous, tragic mistake. Mao was faced with a technological situation, and that situation was industrialization. There was a do-or-die need that Mao had to industrialize. That was the way he saw it. The Tsarist Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Aztecs, the Inca, the Mayans, they'd all been wiped out politically by more technologically advanced European powers. Mao, like Stalin, like many other leaders, knew that he needed to industrialize in order to not be dominated by technologically superior foreign powers. The Great Leap Forward campaign between 1959 and 1961 was an attempt by Mao to achieve rapid industrialization in a new way. Mao thought that he could industrialize by mobilizing hardworking peasantry, and he was going to fast forward through history and shoot China into the future and make them a world power with advanced technology. So Mao said, right, industrialized powers produce much more food than non-industrialized powers, so we're going to increase agricultural production. We're going to get people working in the fields. We're going to kill the sparrows so they don't eat the grain. We're going to mobilize people to increase agricultural production. Industrialized powers produce large amounts of steel, far more than any non-industrialized power is capable of. So we're going to mobilize the peasants, and we're going to set up village steel mills that we're going to get them to bring all their pots and pans and melt them down and turn them into steel. And that way we're going to raise our steel production. We're going to industrialize. These plans were not feasible, but Mao failed to consult with the scientists, the technical experts, the specialists who could have advised him on realistic ways to achieve industrialization. The mistakes of the Great Leap Forward can be broken down into three interlinked problems with the decision-making system that was in place in China at the time. In this episode, we're going to focus on the first problem with the decision-making system in China. The system was not set up to listen to the technical advice. The specialists knew or could have told Mao that this wouldn't work. There were no systems in place to make sure that these specialists were heard. Unrealistically high quotas for grain production were set without any consultation with these experts about whether these were feasible, and when they weren't achieved, information about the reality of that was not conveyed back up to the top of the system. The grain was seized regardless of how much had been made, and we found we had, tragically, mass famine as a result. Like Mao, we're also faced with a technological situation. Our problem is that the negative consequences of the advanced technology that we've developed threaten to destroy our civilization. One of those negative consequences is the climate crisis, and there are a number of others. Are our systems of decision-making set up to listen to the experts? Because when you have advanced technology and when you have technological situations that society needs to respond to, it needs to have accurate information about what it needs to do, how quickly it needs to act. Let's have a look at how our systems of decision-making are set up in terms of the links between the scientific experts on one hand and the policymakers on the other. The IPCC gathers information from a panel of experts and scientists, gathers the research together, and puts it together into a report. Those reports are really long and detailed. Of course, politicians, policymakers do not have time to read the entirety of those reports. The IPCC also produces a summary of the report. Every time it comes out a report, it's got a little short summary, and that's the thing that journalists and politicians actually read. And this is where the problems arise. Okay. Unfortunately, the summary reports have come under the influence of money and power. They include thousands of contributors, many of them in political positions, and they include the representatives of oil-rich nations. So the report summaries, which came under political influence, unlike the actual reports which were not read, consistently understated the scientific truth. Let's look in a bit more detail at the summaries of the report. In 1990, the IPCC's summary of its first report claimed that observed temperature increases could be due to natural variability. The consensus among climate scientists at the time was that the chance that this was the case was 1%. But this 1% probability of error was not mentioned in the summary of the report. It was only buried down in the thick main report, which was not read in. The IPCC summary of the 1993 Greenland ice core study mis-summarized the implications of the study. In a section headed, "There are still many uncertainties," it listed a range of topics on which it claimed, in a reassuring drone of technicality, that further research was needed before secure conclusions could be drawn. Those alarm bells were not translated into information that got across to the policymakers. I shudder to think what went on in that hot tub. The fourth IPCC summary in 2007, despite scientific consensus on accelerated sea level rises, lowered its upper estimate for sea level rises as compared to the previous summary, which itself was a downgrade on the summary before that. The message to laymen and non-experts was that as knowledge improved, estimates were decreasing. Climate scientists, meanwhile, had reached consensus on the opposite reality. The first multidisciplinary, multi-body recognition of certainty about the process of human-induced climate change came in 1995 in the second report of the International Panel on Climate Change, published in Madrid. But the first unequivocal summary report about the implications of 1.5 degree and 2 degree increases in temperature was only published by the IPCC in October 2018. I do realize Obama left power in 2017, which means I've got no real reason to show him falling off a running machine in shock. But I wanted to, and I also know Trump wouldn't have actually read the summary at all, never mind the actual report. All of these subtle interventions by power in our scientific conclusions were utilized extensively by climate change deniers. In 1989, an organized alliance of oil interests, you can see here on the left their present-day 2025 membership, pretty extensive, a lot of big, powerful companies in there. This alliance, the American Petroleum Institute, composed its mission statement, and I quote, "We must make policymakers fully aware of the uncertainties surrounding the global warming issue. The aim of these oil interests was of sowing doubt, giving rise to an industry in itself of climate naysayers who succeeded in infiltrating all levels of American politics. The way they influenced policy was by buying their way into the authority we took to be summarizing the science reliably. In the decades of climate inaction lost to scientific misinformation, the problems have mounted, and our ability to prevent disastrous levels of warming look to have run away from us." In 2024, a Nature study found that inaction between 2024 and the first IPCC report to a $38 trillion loss to the global economy by 2050. A 1980 start on proactive research and development funding, focused policies on climate change could have saved the world between $40 and $150 trillion in 2015 money. The IPCC was supposedly independent. Would it have been easier or harder for climate scientists to get their information understood and to ring those alarm bells if there'd been no supposedly objective authority undermining the truth of what we were trying to say? With those vested interests who undermined them couldn't hide behind the authority of an supposedly independent body summarizing the science. The retort would be that these interests would always find ways to conceal their influence. But my point is that anyone who wants climate actions to succeed should be focused 100% on the creation of shared institutions whose purpose is to navigate the efforts of money at subversion of scientific truth. Even those activists who talk about systems change are usually referring to economic and technological systems. But it's the decision-making systems that make the rules for the developers and operators of technology. It might be said that it is impossible to reform decision-making systems, but history does not support that claim, and that's the subject for another video. The catastrophes of Mao's rule show us that decision-making systems fail when they're not set up to be informed by precise information, and that lesson applies to us. This video is based on an extract from a book I've written called Recovery, which looks to history for guidance about how Western societies can recover from the range of problems they now face. I'm looking for help in getting this published. Click over to my Kickstarter page for more detail.